Let's come to a conversation about cybersecurity, and I'm joined in studio by Vincent Ngundi, who's the head of cybersecurity at the Communications Authority of Kenya. I have Carl Martens, a solution specialist from Microsoft East Africa, and I have Fidelis Muia, the director of technical services at the Kenya Bankers Association. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. Now, just beginning with, there was a report, the Serianu report, cybersecurity report of 2017, showed that Kenya lost approximately 21.2 billion shillings to cybersecurity. And we see that banks and financial institutions in the African countries, because it was an African study, lost $248 million. That's about 24 billion shillings in total in Africa. And governments, that's banks alone, governments lost an equivalent of almost 20.4 billion shillings in Africa. Are we safe? That's the question first we're asking. I'll begin with you, Vincent, in terms of the Kenyans. Everyone has a bank account. Yeah. You know, okay, not everyone, but many people have bank accounts. Or if not bank accounts, you've got your mobile money. We've got a lot of, you know, penetration, even according to the numbers by your organization, the CA. Yeah. How safe are we online?
Thank you very much first for having us here at the studio and to talk about very pertinent issues for all Kenyans. But I'd like to say that for starters, cyber insecurity is a global problem. It's not even a Kenyan problem or an African problem. It's actually a problem that cuts across the world. It affects everybody. And I'd like to also say that there is no one person responsible for issues of cyber insecurity or cyber security for that matter. Coming to the question at hand about the banking issue, I think it's a joint responsibility. Let me put it that way. Yes, indeed, it's a fact that that people are losing money, banks are losing money, individuals are losing money. But I'd like to say that it's a joint responsibility because on one hand, the banks obviously have a responsibility. They're providing a service to the public, to consumers, and they have a responsibility to make sure that that service is as secure as practically possible. So that's on one hand. So they might want to do, of course, put in place technical measures to tighten their security and any security loophole that they may have in their systems. They might want to train also their internal people, their staff, to make sure that they are aware on what they need to do or what they don't need to do to make sure that the services they provide are secure. But the consumers also have a responsibility, and I'll give you an example. It will be very difficult for a bank to prevent somebody from accessing their account if they have given their PIN to somebody else. For example, I'm just saying. So I think the banks also have a responsibility, and that goes to all service providers who use online platforms, to create awareness amongst their customers on the do's and don'ts when it comes to the safe use of the products that they provide to the industry. So for me, it's a joint responsibility. On one hand, the banks have a role, but also the consumers need to have a level of awareness to make sure that, for example, you don't give out your PIN to anybody. You don't use mobile applications that you have downloaded on the internet without checking with the service provider to confirm that they are indeed the genuine mobile applications or applications that you need to use, among other basic ways of ensuring that you have cybersecurity.
Okay, I'll just come first of all cross over to Fidelis because he's mentioned about banks, for instance, and you as the KBA, you've got your member banks, some of whom have been, you know, victims of this kind of attacks. What is being done from the association level and even by the individual banks to ensure that your customers, who are most of us, are safe with our money? Because now we are very entrenched in the digital age where we are transacting. Some people hardly go to banking halls because of that. So what are you doing to ensure that we are safe?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say, as the custodian of the larger chunk of money in circulation in the country, we are the focal point of all the frauds that are perpetrated across the country, number one. Number two, because of that, we have recognized the need to have several things to mitigate against fraud. We have recently, the central bank issued a cybersecurity guideline to all the commercial banks to ensure that they have in place cybersecurity policies, that every bank has cybersecurity officers whose job is specifically to look at cybersecurity, manage risk mitigations for all the channels they put in place. And so as an industry, we are trying to safeguard all the avenues that customers interact with the banks. We have put in place quite a number of customer awareness education programs to make sure that the customers understand the products they use, the safety features that they need. But then again, we also appreciate the challenge. Kenya has a very, very high IT literacy rate. In fact, I think in Africa, we are the hotbed of IT development. So the speed with which we are developing our products is the same speed with which fraudsters are looking to take advantage of the situation. So it's a cat and mouse game. We keep ever looking to close loopholes while they look for the loopholes. So it's always, you need to be vigilant. And like my colleague from the Communications Authority says, the customers have a very focal responsibility, because most of the devices that customers now do are personal interface devices. So banks have facilitated channels where the mobile handset is the primary focus now for transactions for customers, ATMs, internet onlines and such things. So again, customers need to really understand how to use the products and the safety of the facilities that they actually use.
Okay, and I don't know, just before I come to Carl, whether you've heard of, like recently there's a bank where there are people who are saying they found money, their money has been withdrawn or moved away from the account, and it's showing it's from London.
Yes.
And the person is not in London. How does that happen, first of all?
Like my colleague from the Communication Authority says, fraud is everywhere in the country. So what happens is, with this interconnected world, somebody can access a system from virtually anywhere in the world. So I don't have to be physically in Kenya to access my bank account in Kenya. And so with internet, the way banks have collaborated together to interlink their systems, the fraudsters have also collaborated together. There are things known as dark webs, where people get a lot of information and they shop it in the dark web, and attacks can appear from somewhere totally unexpected, because those people also have networks where they collaborate and actually share information.
Okay, and Carl, even Microsoft has a document that talks about Kenya being a lucrative target for cyber criminals, and especially because of your very digitized, insecure consumer habits, as well as inadequate cyber security measures. Maybe you can expound on this for us.
Yeah, so I think there are two points I would like to point out there. One is, I think, in terms of regulation, there is still a lot to be done. There are more and more sophisticated attacks happening every day. The hackers, even nation states now, are hacking companies and so on. So it gets more and more sophisticated. So regulation is always a couple of steps behind of the hackers. So that's definitely something we need to work on in Kenya as a country and Africa in general. Second part there is that apart from the regulation, it's also the organizations in the country who are lagging behind. So there have been major investments by the FSI industry, the banks, the insurance companies, and so on, to secure their platforms. But again, the sophistication of the hackers have become so big that even a company like Microsoft, we spend about $1 billion per year on security to be able to keep up with this. And we have networks across the world. We're connected with different security companies, different large organizations. We monitor everything that happens on our operating systems, on our mail servers, and so on. So all that information we actually leverage to make our customers more secure. So it's very difficult for an organization with a limited size, even for any organization in the world today, to keep up with this. So one of the solutions you could think about there is, do we still need to manage our own data centers? Do we still need to manage our own systems? Because this has become such a sophisticated game that only very large networks of companies, very large networks of organizations can really counter these attacks. So those are the 2 points I would point out in that respect.
He mentioned about regulation, that and the dynamic nature of the digital space is that to some extent you'll always find, he says, that the regulator will always be sometimes behind the dynamics. Is there any way we can try and preempt some things and try and curb them before they hit us?
Yeah, I think, and I agree with Carl. Regulation is one of the key issues and the key challenges the world over. And the global actors have been coming together, that's countries, and they developed what is called what is referred to as the Budapest Convention, which is a set of which is a framework that assists countries to develop legislation that will assist in the deterrence and the management of cybercrime when it happens. As you said, obviously, cybercrime is a challenge. It's very dynamic, and what we've done is to pick the Budapest framework and put it into what we call domesticate it into what is called the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Bill Act, which was enacted by the President in May. Obviously, it's in court because of certain challenges here and there. But I think the law itself is very futuristic because it tries to, because you can't define every crime, but you can define certain aspects of a crime in a generic way so that when it happens, then we have a legal basis for which to prosecute such crimes. And that is what happened with when we developed the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act of 2018. The Act goes beyond just defining offences and penalties. It talks about also investigative procedures because you can't use the traditional ways of investigations to investigate cybercrime. It calls for other mechanisms of ensuring that digital investigations are done in a way that also respects all the rights of the rights of the people. It also talks about issues to do with mutual legal assistance, and this is and we are looking at international cooperation here. As Fidelis said, cybercrime is a global issue, so you really need to have a framework that says that if an actor or a cyber criminal perpetrates their crime in another jurisdiction, then you need to have a mechanism of ensuring that you have a framework for collaborating with other jurisdictions to ensure maybe either they are criminally prosecuted there or they're extradited to face criminal prosecution in our local jurisdiction. So that's what we're doing as it is right now.
So as it is, do we have any way of kind of a legal framework that covers people who may be out of the country?
Yes, we do. So the Computer and Cybercrimes Act actually does that. It has a whole section on mutual legal assistance, which through the AG's office you're able to collaborate with other jurisdictions to make sure that if an offender is outside that country, and it's both ways by the way, so even if an offender commits a crime from within Kenya, targeting another country, then we should be able to assist that other country in terms of either prosecuting that person or extraditing them to face prosecution in the respective jurisdiction.
Okay,
yeah.
Fidelis, I want to come to you as the bankers, because this is one of the main points of interaction between the public and and these risks, when I put it that way. What are some of the areas that we find people getting hit at, so that we can be aware, for the sake of awareness, for someone to know if I do ABCD, I am at greater risk of my money being lost? What are some of the areas based on your own assessment?
Well, from the industry, if you're looking at the man in the street, the touch points with which they interact with the banks are the first line of defense. So we are looking at mobile phones. A lot of people keep their PIN numbers for either mobile applications, mobile banking application. Could it be the mobile virtual money? Same, they put their PINs. And we really are looking at simple things that customers should be sensitized about. For example, don't use the same PIN number across all your devices. So you can't have the same PIN for your banker's card, the same PIN for your mobile, the same PIN for your mobile money. Because if that one is then compromised, then all the other applications again are compromised. That's one. Number two is common sense usage of internet platforms. We see a lot of people who have lost their money. When you follow up, you find they actually interacted with a bank from a cyber cafe. Now, a cyber cafe is not a very secure place for people to actually transact with a bank, because number one, you don't know what other malware is running on that computer. A lot of it is connected to the Wild Wide Web with very little, if any, security. And so people need to be sure of the devices they are using and how the connections are actually connecting to the internet before they actually use. If we could follow those two, then I think we could kill maybe 60 to 70% of fraud that happens online. The other ones then become a bit more sophisticated, and we are now talking of things like social engineering, where you get customers or people who call customers pretending to be customer service agents, asking very leading questions to enable them access information, either to reveal their PIN or to reveal their account numbers and such. Those are a bit more sophisticated, and we are still working with our partners to ensure that we educate the public about them.
Okay, Carl, in regards to, there's the vulnerabilities again, like you're saying, we have people using cyber cafes, because some of them may not have an option. You find someone that may not have a smartphone, so they'll not be able to have the privilege of having an app or to go to the browser and they have to go there. What are the vulnerabilities, just in addition to what you said, that we are facing when we put ourselves in that situation?
Yeah, so I think password hygiene, that's the number one, right? So in Kenya, 81% of cybercrime is linked to a password stolen, or a password that's used randomly, or is a very easy one, right? So 81% of all cybercrime is related to passwords. So that's a huge thing. You talked about social engineering. So if you get an email today from a certain source, and it asks you for information about your bank account, it asks you for your PIN number and so on, first check the email address where you get it from. If it's a gmail.com address or something of the likes, you can already identify it's not coming from your bank or from your telco. So take that, be aware, assume that you're going to be compromised, contact those organizations who you think or who try to contact you, to make sure that's effectively them contacting you. So that's another measure you can take. Going to cyber cafes, using particular apps can give you also lots of vulnerability. So it's not because an app is on the App Store or the Play Store that it's a secure app, that it's not going to take over your system, that it's not something which enables you to take over your phone or take over your machine and use it in a botnet, for example. So it means that other people can remotely take over your machine and use the resources, or they can see you tapping in your password and so on. So make sure when you download something, make sure it's from a source that's authenticated, and make sure that it's from a reliable source. And those are a couple of measures you can take to really make sure that you reduce that risk.
Okay, you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I think just to add on what you've said regarding the online scams, we've seen quite a number in the last actually year or so. We've seen quite a number of incidences where we have a lot of fraudulent or fake mobile applications. We also have fake social media platforms saying that, oh, this is a bank so-and-so or SACCO so-and-so, and we are providing this service, we're providing this loan at this percentage, first send X amount of money to be able to be registered and so on and so forth. So I think there is a huge responsibility on the part of the banks. This is for the Kenya Bankers Association, to really go out proactively and talk to their customers and tell them, for starters, once you introduce, for example, mobile banking platforms or online banking platforms, these are the genuine links, that you should use to access these applications. Because at times, it's not about, and it actually even affects the best of us, I can assure you. These are not things that are restricted to just the novice end users. No, it actually even affects the best of us. So the issue is to come out clear, because the only person who can authenticate and validate that an application is genuine is the service provider themselves. I think that is one thing. Secondly, also, I think that also banks need to also consciously go to these mobile stores, whether it's Apple or Google, and check to see whether they are being impersonated, so they take down proactively. Proactiveness will play a very key role to ensure that the innocent end user is not affected by some of these things. So I think that comes out very prominently. Social media is a big problem again, as I mentioned, and there is need to go out there to look at how your brand is being used or misused on the social media platforms, because people trust social media quite a lot.
Yeah.
We've seen even cases where people even hook up on social media. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I have seen some myself.
Example, I'm just saying, and that's really an emotional thing. You can imagine. We've even seen cases where people actually share their banking, very sensitive banking information online. Somebody just goes there, creates a story or a chat, and try to tease people, give me your banking details, I have something I need to do. And you see people actually divulging their PINs and passwords and so on and so forth. Awareness proactively from the service providers is key, even as we worked as a government and together with stakeholders to make sure that the consumers also get some level of awareness. And as Fidelis says, it's those simple things. 70% of the issues will be solved by just protecting your PIN or not using the wrong cyber cafe, for example, because a cyber cafe is an insecure platform. We're not saying don't use it for other purposes, obviously, but you can't use it for sensitive transactions like banking transactions.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that as well. So if you look at those cyber cafes, for example, just from a consumer point of view, how can you have a feel like, is this a place I can trust or not?
Yes.
Look at, for example, the machines they have, the operating systems they operate. If they're still on Windows XP, for example, which is, I think, a version that came out 10 years ago, they haven't patched those machines, they haven't upgraded to the most modern version, which is Windows 10 right now, it's an insecure place. So, because Microsoft even doesn't support that operating system anymore because it's so old. So it means it doesn't get any security updates anymore. So very important, if you see a cyber cafe that runs, illegal, very old versions of Windows, walk away and go to a more reliable
So
place.
to be clear, which are the ones which are covered by Microsoft, so that we can just be clear?
Yes, so we still support Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows 8, so those are the supported versions we still have. But Windows 10 has specifically been engineered to combat cybersecurity threats. So that version is really hooked on that network I was talking about and gets a lot of security features inbuilt with the platform, where Microsoft, we have global security operations centers worldwide that Microsoft is actually monitoring all the time, updating, patching, and that's where you'll get the best security today.
Okay, and it's been mentioned across the panel in regards to the passwords we use, the PIN number we use, and I look at the Communication Authority report for the last quarter, that was April to June, and we see the top targeted usernames as well as passwords, okay? And so when it comes to the top targeted passwords, the top 10, I'll just go through them quickly. The most targeted is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The people who use that as their password, you know, and we have those who use the word password as their password. That had fewer instances than the initial one. Then after that is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then admin, then 1, 2, 3, default, NAS for free, root, test, Alpine. Now, when it comes to the passwords, these are the ones that are really, you know, targeted. Is there any risk, and this one I'll throw it to whoever would like to pick it up, any risk in using the same password for almost all my accounts? It may not be any of this. I may have my password is my grandmother's name mixed with my grandfather's and my uncle's, you know, for instance, but I use the same one across my Facebook, my internet banking access, my email. Is there any risk with that?
Yes, so definitely. So I think Fidelis already mentioned it earlier. If you use one PIN, once the PIN is compromised, I can go to your credit card, I can go to your M-Pesa account, I can open your phone, and so on and so on. So once you only have one single password, you're compromised everywhere. So make sure you have different passwords for different applications. I know it's hard, it requires an effort.
With so many applications, I'll have a password for my Facebook, for my bank account,
Yes.
for my Twitter, for my Instagram. I mean, that's usually why people will have the same password across.
Yes. So you can use password vaults for that. That's a technology you can use. I think it's freely available online as well. There are very good providers for those kind of solutions. But still, I think it's better to have to reset your password now and again, and to get a new password when you have forgotten for that particular application. I was parking my car with the Nairobi City Council this morning. Of course, I only come with my car into CBD once every month or so, so I always forget the PIN. So I have to reset that PIN. Yes, it's a process, but at least I'm secure. At least I'll not be compromised if somebody would know my PIN and use it across different applications.
So does this also apply for the social media accounts? Is it safe to have them different?
Yes.
It's safe to have them different?
Yes, the principle is the same. Okay. We have within the industry certain rules on how you should use a password. For example, don't use common words. Like you mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that is very easy to guess. We have softwares that these hackers use, which use what is known as dictionary attacks. So they basically load a dictionary and apply a password multiple times from that dictionary just to see whether you are using words from a dictionary. So those rules that we say, sometimes we have policies on passwords where they say, don't use a word that's in a dictionary. And most applications actually will check. If you put in a word that's in a dictionary, they don't accept that as a password. What we normally do is we say it should be complex, a minimum of 8 characters. You should have a mixture of uppercase and lowercase. You should have a number within the password. And you should use something that is not easily guessable by anybody. For example, if I know you are George, I shouldn't use George 1, 2, 3 as a password. I mean, everybody can be able to guess that. So you should use something that only you personally know. It is recommended you use multiple different passwords for each application, but we know in today's online world, there are so many applications that require passwords. So you can have an idea of how many passwords you use, which you then regularly change, but you spread them across the different systems that you use. So, for example, personally, I have 5 passwords, which I apply on my social media. I have one set of passwords. For my banking, I have another set of passwords. For my other applications, I have another set of passwords. And then I change them every 90 days. So I only need to remember 3 passwords in every 90 days. But they are personal and they are not easy to guess. So once you have that and you put it in, it's actually a discipline. You basically train yourself to do that every 2-3 months, and it becomes a habit, and then after that you're secure. But a lot of people don't. They use the same password across all their systems, and the moment it is lost, then everything else is fair game.
Okay.
I think one of the, just to add to that, one of the ways that the issue of passwords is being solved, Carl has also spoken about the issue of using Vault, or a tool, a software for helping you to manage your passwords for that matter, is also the use of two-factor authentication, where you have an extra factor of authentication. And we've seen it with obviously all banks, almost all banks, I can speak for that, so that the password is not enough. You must be asked either a question, a security question, or a code is sent to your mobile.
Two-step access.
Two-step access, actually. That's the simplest way of looking at it. So that becomes very important. And that is being adopted even by social media providers. Free email, like Google is actually having that. So we'd encourage consumers of those such products to embrace two-factor authentication. Because obviously the issue of password management is real, yet it's necessary. But to help ease that, then the other way is to also look at having an extra factor of authentication that is only known to you again. More specifically to the report that we published, those passwords apparently are coming from, the issue behind those passwords is because we are having, and we have many devices. We have network devices, we have switches, routers, we have cameras, for example, CCTV cameras. We have all sorts of equipment that we are connected to the internet. What most vendors do is that whenever they manufacture those systems, they set a default username and password. And at times, when our technical people deploy these systems, they forget to change the default password. And that's why we are seeing such kinds of passwords being most prevalent. Because what an attacker will do is that they'll scan the internet, using for example, it's called a brute force attack, where they try to guess username and password combinations across the internet. When they find such vulnerable devices which have default username and passwords, then they gain very easy entry into the systems. And the rest now becomes more or less a calamity. So there is need for also our technical people. And that's why I was saying it also gets to the best of us. Yes, Fidelis said they were very happy to churn out a lot of technology, but we need to have cybersecurity ingrained in part of that process, so that it's not a byproduct of what we want to do, but it's really part and parcel of the journey towards developing these solutions, whether it is software that we're developing, whether it is networks that we're building. Because, for example, I can tell you scan. I'll give you an example of one of the biggest attacks that happened 2 years ago in the US. It's called the Mirai botnet. So 60% of the internet in the US was brought down by CCTV cameras, because somebody got to compromise hundreds and thousands of CCTV cameras, and they were able to do what is called a denial of service attack on some of the biggest data centers in America. So attacks are not even being done by humans anymore. Of course, they are controlled by humans, but you can imagine it's not about big servers and big machines. It's also those small machines that when you bring together the power, the small power, and combine it into one big force, it actually becomes a force that can actually bring down critical infrastructure.
So on top of things like multi-factor authentication and so on, and having password hygiene, so we know that not everyone will have password hygiene. As Microsoft, we accept that. So what we are also doing now, we look at behavior of people. If Vincent logs into his system here in Nairobi, and 10 minutes later he does the same in Moscow, that's not possible. So even though that person in Moscow might know the password and so on, because of that impossible behavior of that person, of that user, will actually shut down that connection as well. So we even, on top of the things you see as a consumer, in the backend, we use machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on to spot those type of behaviors and stop you in your tracks of accessing. And
when you just shut down that connection, how long does it take to get it back up? If, say, like for example, if it's Vincent and he's in Nairobi and someone else does something in Russia, and then you shut it down. So what does it take for him to get access back, and how long?
So of course, Microsoft allows their customers to set kind of thresholds on what kind of behavior they think is acceptable or not. So it would be the security operation centers in the banks who will get a report to say like, okay, this particular user, Vincent, he seems to be in 2 locations at once. What's your response as a security operations center to that particular behavior? So either they block or unblock that kind of connection. So it's in the hands of our customers actually to open up those connections again.
All right. And I'm just thinking about, you've talked about this, like you should get like an app for saving passwords or something of the sort. How safe is this as well? Because again, it's another online application, because I'm using an online platform to save, you know, to shield myself from online attacks. So how does it work? It might almost feel like I'm not exposing myself. That's why many of us will say my mind is my safest place.
I think for starters, let's say that there is no system that is I would say that is safe globally. I don't think there's any, as long as it's connected to the. They usually say that even maybe the safest is the one that's not connected to the internet. But again, we know that the weakest link in the whole cybersecurity issue is a human being. So unless that system is also away from human beings, then that's the only time we can say that it's really safe. But to come to your question on how safe that application is, obviously it can't be foolproof. That's for starters. But again, such systems deploy other mechanisms to ensure that the data they're hosting is also secure. So encryption is one of them. So they'll make sure that as much as they're hosting data for you, the data is not also in clear. Even the owners of the system cannot also access the data. That it's in an encrypted format. So I think there are other mechanisms that are looked at to make sure that that application itself is also has secure mechanisms of making sure that they host the data they have in a safe way.
Okay, and I think we'll just take a short break there. We'll be back with more conversations, including pin harvesting. We find people who harvest pins, and that's a scary thing. It's a scary thing, and even just from ATMs and the likes, and we'll get into that in just a bit. But now we'll take a short break on NTV Today. We'll be back with more conversations in regards of your safety and the safety of your money and your data online after this short break. Come back to our conversation in studio in regards to cybersecurity. And I'd mentioned something, and I'll throw it to Fidelis in regards to PIN harvesting.
Yep.
There are people who somehow get our PIN numbers, be it my ATM PIN number. Right. Some of them would be, I'm at the ATM. And somehow you even get paranoid. You try and look up, is this same camera that's meant to be my security, the one which is being used to see what I've punched in? Yeah. How does this happen, first of all? What are the different ways that you found that people say ATM pins are harvested, and how should we safeguard ourselves from that as well specifically? Okay,
thank you. First of all, let's clarify the cameras that are in those ATM lobbies are security cameras. They are not used to harvest pins. Having removed that, the biggest problem we have with pins, especially at point of sales, it could be an ATM, it could be a supermarket, is basically people showing the pin as they key it in. So, for example, you could go to an ATM and the keyboard is in front of you and people are crowded around there. There are people who are looking over your shoulder. So what we recommend as the industry is that you should basically shield your PIN as you enter. And if you notice, a lot of banks have already put in devices over their keyboards so that you can easily cover the keyboard so that people don't look over your shoulder to see that. That's one. The other big problem with the loss of pins is people who purport to help others at an ATM. So somebody can come in and you are told that this machine is not working, so the person tells you, let me assist you. This other one is working, give me your card, let me try it here. And then they ask you, what is your PIN? And while you divulge their PIN, they pretend to give the transaction and give you back your card. What you don't know is they gave you a fake card and they kept your card, and now they have the PIN to it. So then that is another story. We have another problem with the PIN harvesters in terms of...
Sorry, just on that one, do you then have, do banks have any kind of training to the guards there to know how to assist? Because you'll find that people who are genuinely unable to use their card, right, and they need assistance, and you'll find the guard who's there who will go there. Are there specific guidelines in terms of when you're assisting someone who does not know, this is how you should help them?
Yes, the first point is if you are at a bank or an ATM outside the bank, we recommend that you actually walk into the banking hall and seek some staff of the bank to help you. If it is outside, there are the security guards. Some of them have been trained to help. What we don't recommend is any random stranger purporting to come and help you, because they could be helping you, but helping themselves in the process as well. So we normally say, if you can't get the staff of the bank, then the security guard will be in a position to help. But again, even if he's helping, let him not ask you for the PIN. Let him show you the procedure of using the device and ask you to put the PIN. When he asks you to put the PIN, put it yourself. Don't give it to him to put it for you, because you never know. Some of those guards are also not as trustworthy as we would like them to believe. So those are the main issues. Online, we have a lot of scams people run, and especially if you're using browsers. You could be told to key in, maybe log in, and then somebody sends you an email telling you, here is the document you requested, click here to see it. When you click that, it's actually a link that then takes you to an unsecure website, and all that information that is on your computer is harvested. So we normally recommend you don't click on emails from people you don't know. And if they ask you to click on a link, do not click on that link, because we've seen quite a lot of things. Not only do they redirect your browser, they can also install software onto your PC because you've clicked a link, so strange links. We also have other things like social engineering skills, where people pretend to call you that you've won a competition. Let us be clear. You cannot win money in a competition you did not enter. So people calling you that you've won in this competition, those are normally scams to entice you to start divulging information. So we need people to just be aware that whenever you are transacting or you are being called about anything purporting to use your banking applications, be on guard. Be on guard.
And you know, the thing is, they do like a probability thing. They throw it out to X people, and they know they may not get all. If they say to 1,000 people, they know they'll not get all 1,000. They'll probably land on 200 who have actually taken part in that competition.
Indeed.
And I guess that's why you find a lot of people who are, you know, gullible or you know, may not really think through it all. You find many people being very susceptible to this kind of con games, and in a number of instances. And you've also mentioned about when you're using a machine. And I want to bring this to Carl. I've gone and used a machine that is not my personal machine. And maybe it's at a cyber cafe like we've mentioned, or I've used, this is the company machine, and I'm not the only one who uses it. When I log out of my, I've logged into my Twitter, I've logged onto my WhatsApp here, I've logged onto my Facebook, etc. After I log out, is that enough?
Yeah, so definitely. So the first thing I would recommend, first you log on to the computer, okay? See if that's already a secure logon you're gonna do. So basically, if you log on to a Windows machine, you have to key in some password to get into the machine. So that's the first step of authentication. Then you go to another website like Facebook and so on. So you key in your password again, and you're logged on to that particular application. So because you're logging on, make sure that you log off of all those applications. Again, you talked about a cyber cafe in this particular use case. Make sure it's a trustworthy place to do these kind of things. Because sometimes if you have an Amazon account or a Facebook account or whatever, your credit card details are connected with that account. Sometimes you have enabled even one-click pay, where just the password enables you to pay with that credit card account. So you're potentially also giving away access to credit cards. So make sure to take those steps to log off all applications. You don't need to go to extra steps beyond that, but make sure you safely log off of all applications.
Yes, Fidelis.
Yes, but I normally get concerned because there are quite a number of social media applications, and I think you can name them. I don't want to malign anyone, but in particular. But some of them actually have a button where it says stay online. So even if you switch off, as long as you logged on and you had selected to stay online, when you open the browser again, it takes you back to the same applications you were. So it's very, very critical that you specifically log off so that you can log on again. But if you just switch off the browser, for example, you are leaving a cyber cafe and you just shut down the browser, the person will reopen the browser, look at the history and click on that history. And if you had said remain online, then all your applications will still be available to you. So it's very, very important that when you finish doing what you're doing, log off, physically log off, if possible log off from the machine, so that the next user will come in and log in by themselves and shut down the application so that they virtually log in themselves. Otherwise it's dangerous.
Back to our conversation here, and gentlemen, we are talking about the safety of money and not only money but also data, because data is a big deal, because sometimes it may not be the actual end money, it may also be the data we have. But when you talk about, for instance, and I want to bring this to you, Vincent, I don't know whether CA comes in here, whether it's a CBK thing, when we're transacting on the counter. I've gone to buy something at a supermarket, like, you know, Fidelis had mentioned, and I'm paying on my phone, and they usually ask me for my number. What's your number? So through my number, it now connects the transaction.
Yeah.
How can we be shielded from that? Because we saw someone who did a Twitter thread of how he listened to a lady say her number. He saved the number. He searched on Truecaller, got her name on Truecaller, then looked for her on Facebook, found Facebook. He found a lot of information about her on Facebook, and it can easily be a way to now either stalkers or otherwise, and which could also be life-threatening.
Yeah.
How can we be shielded from this? And is this really under you, or is this a joint thing between yourself and the CBK?
It's actually a joint issue, and mostly it's also a consumer issue. It's an end-user issue, because it's something that points of sale should put measures to prevent. And one of the ways is looking for mechanisms of ensuring that it's either you have a confidential way of entering that, because it's personal information.
Yes.
And what they're saying is that you should desist from sharing personal information, whether it's by yourself or by your own volition, or whether it's being solicited from you, from even a joining person. Because supermarkets, for example, you give an example of a supermarket or any other point of sale, are genuine providers of services. So you need to look for mechanisms to ensure that we protect that private information of your consumers or of your customers, to ensure that it's not misused. The case in point you raise is a very real case, and it goes even back to the conversation you're having about passwords and sharing your passwords across all platforms. When you have access to one, for instance, if somebody would access, if you use a common password across all multiple applications for that matter, then, for instance, if one is compromised, then that person will actually have kind of access to your digital life. They'll be able to access just using that one password. And for instance, if they know your name and your password, then they'll go on online on Google, whatever search engine, search for your name. They'll see your LinkedIn account, they'll see your Facebook account or potential Facebook account,
exactly.
Twitter account, and they can have access to all those. And beyond having access, they'll have access to your people, to the people who are, to your friends on social media and so on and so forth. We have had cases where people are actually conned, where somebody gets access to somebody's Facebook account, and then they solicit funds from the people within your networks. And guys have actually gotten money out of it. So I think it's an issue of protecting personal identifiable information, whatever it is. Whether it's passwords, whether it's your email, whether it is your phone number, your bank account number, your national ID number, your date of birth, your name for that matter, and so on. It's about protecting that. There's a button that also, I want to go back to the issue of also logging in and logging out of applications. Yes. There's an extra button I want to mention over and above what Fidelis said. And it's the one for remember my password.
Yes.
So, at times people will sign in and say, remember my password. That's a very dangerous password, especially if you're logging in through a computer or machine for that matter that you do not have control over. It might work if you have overall control over your device, through it if it's, for example, a personal device, but at the same time it's not encouraged. Because what anybody needs to do, for example, if they access that service from an unprotected or a system that's accessed by multiple people, case in point, cyber cafes, then they'll need to open the browser, look at the history as Fidelis said, then they click and they say just log in. They don't even need to know your password. But yet when they get into your application, they can do multiple things. Contacting your people, defrauding them, they can even change your password if the system allows. They can take over your digital life. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think it's more of a consumer issue. And I can tell you research has shown that over 70% of the cyber insecurity issues that we have can just be dealt with by addressing the consumer issues, which are not also very complex issues.
And then again, it comes to the point of on our devices, like he said, with where you've got control over.
Yeah.
Those ones we don't log out of usually. We find I'll not log out of my social media platforms and the likes. What extra caution do we need to take to ensure that we're not overly exposed?
Yeah, so two things you can do. One, you secure it, your phone. Secure your phone. Put a PIN on your phone. I see a lot of people who still don't have a PIN on your phone. If you have your password, you remember your password on your Facebook account, on your whatever Jumia account, Masoko account, and so on. where you can do payments with. If somebody finds your phone, he opens the phone, he can do a payment. So you're exposing yourself by not, and that's also why Fidelis said, log out of the machine as well when you're in a cyber cafe. Don't just log out of the application itself, log out of the machine or shut it down so it needs to reboot, right? So because then the next person who's gonna log in is gonna log in through another account and he won't have access to the browser's history. You can also purge the browser's history. It's a more complex process, but any browser can actually has a feature where you can delete cookies, passwords, and all those stuff. So that's an extra precaution that you can take. So there are many ways to tackle it.
Okay, and I just want to bring it back to you, Vincent. Excuse me. Where we've talked about, we've said it's a big issue in terms of, you said it's a user thing in terms of when we are paying and we have to give some of our information, be it our personally identifiable information. Yeah. What is being done in this regard to ensure that we can be shielded? Because we'll say that now, and I'll go out here and go to a supermarket, and the exact same thing will happen to me. And it seems there's nothing, from how it seems, there's nothing that will legally bar them from doing it that way. And so, my choice of transaction is using my mobile money.
Yeah. So as a government, and more specifically the Communications Authority, one of our responsibilities is consumer awareness. Obviously, we don't do it in isolation. We do it as a concerted effort with other players. Kenya Bankers is one of the organizations that we work with very closely. We work with the telco industries. We work with academia. We also work with again, other players in the industry to make sure that, especially critical information infrastructure providers, to make sure that there's a level of awareness amongst the consumers. Obviously, as I mentioned, the first responsibility is on the provider of the service. So it goes without saying that one of the requirements when you're providing a service is to make sure that the service is not only of quality, but it's also safe. So one of the primary responsibilities for the person providing the service to create a level of awareness, but also to put in place mechanisms. Fidelis says that banks are now having kind of like a cover on the keypad of ATMs. That is to go a long way in ensuring that even if the user doesn't have the knowledge to protect or shield their PIN, then at least there's a mechanism. At times people even think it's a nuisance where you really have to bend to to see the keypad, but it's really a mechanism to ensure that you protect. That's proactiveness on the part of the banks on one hand. I think other point of sale people should also put in mechanisms. And one of the ways is to have a way of ensuring that it's either manually put by the person, if it's a number, for example. You mentioned the case of inputting a number when you're using a mobile payment mechanism to pay for something at a point of sale. It's either to tell that person, key in your number, for example. I mean, that one won't be hard. Or finding a mechanism, whatever it is, to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Is there no way we can tell this, that there's no way that the businesses can actually be told to have better stewardship of their customers' information, considering it's in a public space?
Yes, indeed. As I mentioned, consumer awareness is one of the key issues. The other one, obviously, is the issue of regulation, and we are looking at ways of ensuring that, and as we learn some of these issues, looking at ways that to tighten and enhance, not really tighten, but enhance the mechanisms that we have in place, so that there is a level of responsibility when it comes to the handling of personal identifiable information. And one of the things that you'll notice that we're currently in the process of developing data protection bill, privacy data protection bill, and that will give responsibilities to various stakeholders in terms of the protection of personal identifiable information. So there are many other mechanisms that are looking at it, but for us we feel, other than regulation, awareness amongst the consumers themselves, where even you can go and say, I'm not comfortable giving my, saying out my mobile number loud, or I'm not comfortable giving out my PIN. It's also an issue of the responsibility being also on the consumers of these products.
Yeah, I think in the case that you've just mentioned, so you give your telephone number to the cashier, and it's definitely, I think, a process that's flawed. You can very easily integrate, in this case, if it was a Safaricom M-Pesa transaction or it was a bank's transaction, you could integrate this with the bank systems, and the cashier can actually have that information digitally to make sure that he sees that there is a confirmation of the payment. There's no need of somebody giving their phone number. So I think the process is flawed in this case. Where regulation has helped, the European Union has a regulation called GDPR. We have seen South Africa, who has this regulation for privately identifiable identifiable information, and these policies have really helped, its regulations has really helped to really make sure that these processes in those organizations are being streamlined, because there are very big fines tied to losing PII, personal identifiable information, from your consumers as an organization. So there are processes in place, and even the EU regulation applies here in Kenya as well. You see that a lot of banks, a lot of retailers are now making sure that they are conformed to those particular regulations, because of also the big stick that's behind there, which are big fines for those companies when they lose information from their consumers.
Okay, and excuse me, I want to just bring in the aspect of solutions. We've mentioned them as we've gone along, and what solutions are there now for a lot of these issues across the board, because these are some issues we can't necessarily completely talk about and exhaust entirely. But I want to begin from the banks. What solutions are you giving? What solutions are there to ensure that as I go to transact, to go and withdraw my money, if I'm going to swipe at a point of sale, if I am going to transact on my phone or online on my machine, what is being done to ensure that we are safe?
Apart from the awareness which we have been discussing, we have quite a number of solutions. Some of them we have already alluded to. We have ensured that, first of all, we basically segment the transactions. So for example, if you're going to transact a transaction of 2,000 shillings, we put a level of security that is commensurate with the amount of money that you're doing. So for example, if you're doing something of 100,000, we don't just require a password. We require a password, and we send you an alternative method of you identifying yourself so that the system can work to check against that. Number two, some of the values that we transact, we actually ask you to contact the bank before the transaction is actually carried out, so that we make sure that it is there and it is a genuine transaction. We have quite a number of things we have put in place. For example, you remember we used to have magnetic stripe cards for all cards. We since removed all those magnetic stripes, and we put in the pin and chip, which allows you to put a second layer of authentication onto your card transactions. On the mobile platform, we have ensured that now we can actually intercept those SIM swaps that we were originally used to having, people losing their cards or card replacements. Now we have brought that in conjunction with the telco players. We have solutions that are actually fixing that particular problem. And we continue to develop more solutions. What is important to know now is that within the payments industry now, it is interoperable, and partners are getting together and working together to sort out this issue. Just to mention, we are working with telco operators in MNOs to secure the mobile platform. We are working with the Communications Authority to ensure that all networks that are running these payment systems are secured to a certain level of internationally accepted standard. We are putting security operation centers and computer incidents response teams in all commercial banks so that we can quickly respond and share this information. And so you will start seeing a lot of concerted efforts to secure these systems than before, because we have realized that online is becoming a very big potential danger to us.
Okay. I want to come to the government. Then I'll close the question to you as he closes. What is being done by the government for you as the regulator? This comes right onto your desk in regards to cybersecurity, and what is being done, what is the government doing to ensure that you safeguard our systems and our people from these attacks, which are increasingly becoming more dynamic and just becoming more in terms of their frequency?
So the government has identified ICTs as a key enabler in the realization of the Big Four agenda, but beyond that, even Vision 2030. And that, because those two instruments really speak to the needs of the Kenyans, and also by ensuring that Kenya is very well placed globally to become globally competitive. And obviously, cybersecurity plays a very key role when it comes to ICTs, because you can't have ICTs without them being secure. So security becomes important towards the adoption of ICTs. So what the government has done, it established the National Computer Incident Response Team with a point of contact on cybersecurity issues for government, or for the country for that matter. And we work in collaboration with many players, because as I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity is a concerted effort. it is a collective responsibility. It's not an issue that can be handled by one person. So we work with the Kenya Bankers Association as a representative of the banking and financial sector. We work with the telecommunication service providers who bring together the various telecom players. We work with academia because of their role in research and also in building capacity. And we also work with critical information infrastructure providers, especially key government institutions that provide critical services, as well as key organizations, private organizations like the mobile operators, who have a fundamental role in terms of ensuring that we have not only a safe internet, a safe cyberspace, but also to ensure that, and you know, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think 80% or more of Kenyans transact using mobile payment solutions. 90%, if not more, of banking transactions are done online. KBA can attest to that. So those are key players and critical players that we work with. But we also know that cybersecurity is not a national issue. It's not a Kenyan issue. It's a global issue. So we also work with players outside the country, all social media providers, the people who provide hosting services across the board, because you realize that majority of hosting services are actually done outside the country. We also work with cloud computing platform providers, Microsoft being one of them, Google, Amazon, and so on and so forth, among other players that have a key role to play in the ecosystem. So obviously there is a need for that concerted effort. There is a need for continued awareness, and as Fidelis says, you'll see more activity moving forward, because it's been a journey. We're heading in the right direction, but it's been a journey. And the journey requires that people understand and appreciate what the value is of coming together to solve this problem. And that's why you'll see quite a bit of activity from the awareness point of view, from the coordinated response point of view, and also from capacity building and research in this area.
Okay, and I want to just come to Carl in our closing remarks. And one of the things that is in the Communications Authority report, when they looked at the top 5 targeted services, number 1 is Microsoft Directory Services. It's a port being used for sharing files in Windows. Number 2 is HTTP. Then we go to SIP, that session in initiation protocol. Secure Shell is number 4, and Telnet is number 5. So Microsoft Directory Services is a top targeted service. How have you ensured that, you know, this kind of a statistic does not turn into being one of the most vulnerable or one of the most attacked and successfully attacked platforms, to shield that? And just in your closing remark in regards to what needs to be done to keep our assets and our people safe online.
Yeah, so I think Microsoft Directory Services is basically an authentication mechanism that's being used within organizations to access in the digital world. Keep your password to yourself. Make sure it's complex enough. And if you get these phishing attacks and so on, where you get an SMS from somebody asking you to repay some M-Pesa or something, you know it's fake. Contact Safaricom, contact Airtel or one of the other telco providers to verify this claim, and don't just go into transactions with people you do not know. That would be my key takeaway.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You have something to add? 30 seconds.
Yeah, just to add to that, the National SAT is based at the Communications Authority. We run 24/7, so in case any member of the public has an issue, they can get in touch with us. We have details on our website. They can go to the CA website, and they'll find details on how to get in touch with us. We will either assist them in resolving the issue or advise them on what they need to do. So I thought it's important to just mention that we're available to assist.
So that's what, online?
Online, it's you could do online. There's a hotline number that they can call. There's an email address. There's an online portal that they can use. They can also use the traditional way of writing if they have to. But really, in this digital space, we'd rather use digital means to communicate.
It's faster.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. That's Vincent Ngundi, the head of cybersecurity at the Communication Authority of Kenya. Martens, the solution specialist at Microsoft East Africa, and Fidelis Muia, the director of technical services at the Kenya Bankers Association. Gentlemen, it's been a very informative conversation, I believe. And I believe there's a lot of nuggets to pick from this, because ultimately, the money, everyone has a pocket and the money they're trying to put in there, and they really want to make sure that no one dips into that digital pocket and pulls out their money. It's a conversation that we can have for days on end, but we'll have to bring to a close. That's the conversation we've been having on cybersecurity, and just largely seeing that a lot of these things are just not as difficult or as cryptic as has been perceived. It's as much, like has been said, don't give access to someone who does not live in your house, or who you should not allow into your house. Same thing with the digital space. It's not as difficult necessarily. Some things may be technical, but in terms of shielding yourself, there's a lot of it that has to do with you yourself and the government, as well as the private sector.